Every mechanism that creates war, every philosophical error that destroys moral responsibility, and every technical addiction that shortens human life stems from the same fundamental source: our species' inability to recognize that consciousness itself is the force determining whether we evolve or destroy ourselves. I'm Mark Roach, and welcome back to Transcendent. Today we're exploring chapters 43 through 45 of Gurdjieff's masterwork, where Beelzebub's final observations reveal the interconnected patterns underlying humanity's most destructive behaviors. These insights are being validated by cutting-edge neuroscience research that should fundamentally change how we understand conflict, morality, and our relationship with technology. The 43rd teaching, the neuroscience of human warfare. Chapter 43 addresses humanity's most perplexing characteristic, our unique capacity among all three brain beings in the universe to periodically engage in mutual destruction. No other conscious species exhibits this behavior. This makes human warfare not just a social problem, but a cosmic anomaly requiring special understanding. Beelzebub identifies several psychological mechanisms that prevent humans from recognizing the horror of war despite processing the intellectual capacity to understand it. Individual insights never spread due to lack of unified organization for collective action. Humans can only think clearly when their basic survival needs are satisfied, creating conditional rather than constant access to reason. Contemporary education systems actively prevent genuine understanding of reality by training automatic rather than conscious thinking. Modern neuroscience research validates Beelzebub's analysis with disturbing precision. Studies reveal that war and conflict are often rooted in what researchers call sacred values, what I call sacred cows, deeply held beliefs about nationhood, religion, or identity that activate brain regions associated with meaning and purpose rather than cost-benefit analysis. When people hold sacred values, attempts to change their behavior through external pressure, including sanctions or incentives, often backfire to increasing commitment and willingness to fight. Brain imaging studies of members of non-state armed groups show that social rejection makes extremist offers more appealing. The anterior cingulate cortex, which processes both physical pain and social exclusion, shows increased activation when people feel rejected by mainstream society. This neural response makes radical group membership psychologically comforting because it provides belonging and meaning that mainstream society denies. Research by neuroscientist Nafis Hamid demonstrates that feelings of exclusion can transform non-sacred values into sacred ones, increasing willingness to fight and die for them. Crucially, neuroimaging reveals that this propensity for conflict decreases when critical exchanges occurs within the group itself, especially when factional members begin emphasizing nonviolent methods. The prefrontal cortex regions responsible for problem solving and logical thinking become more active when internal feedback rather than external pressure. Contemporary conflicts validate these findings. The rise of political extremism globally correlates with increasing social fragmentation and digital echo chambers that eliminate internal group dialogue. Social media algorithms optimize for engagement through outrage and tribal identification rather than through discussion, systemically preventing the kind of internal group reflection that neuroscience shows can reduce conflict. But here's the crucial contemporary application. The same neural mechanisms that create susceptibility to extremist recruitment operate in ordinary political discourse. The amygdala hijack that makes people defensive or aggressive during conflicts can be triggered by something as simple as disagreeing social media posts. The prefrontal cortex systems required for rational conflict resolution require conscious cultivation through practices that most people avoid because they're uncomfortable. The 44th teaching, the destruction of moral agency. Chapter 44 provides the philosophical climax of Gurdjieff's entire work by identifying the fundamental error underlying all human religious, ethical, and political confusion, the concept of good and evil, as external forces rather than as consequences of conscious or unconscious human choice. Now, this chapter reveals why humanity has systemically destroyed its capacity for authentic moral development. The Maleficent idea originated with Makare Kronboskian, who was an Atlantean scientist who used good and evil to describe cosmic forces operating through conscious beings. But his sophisticated understanding degraded through mechanical transmission until it became crude dualism that attributes moral responsibility to external forces rather than individual choice. This philosophical virus prevents humans from taking responsibility for their psychological states while maintaining the illusion that they're ethical beings. Contemporary research on moral responsibility validates Gurdjieff's analysis through studies of how people respond to genetic and environmental explanations for behavior. When actions are attributed to external causes like genetics, brain chemistry, or social conditioning, people consistently reduce attributions of moral responsibility. The mechanism operates through what researchers call genetic determinism, the belief that external factors restrict human freedom by guaranteeing behavioral outcomes. Studies show this pattern operates systemically based on moral judgment. People are more resistant to external explanations for harmful behavior than for beneficial behavior because they're motivated to maintain their right to blame. This creates what researchers call blame validation processing, constructing explanations that justify assigning responsibility when they want to punish, while accepting external explanations when they want to excuse. The neuroscience is revealing both regions associated with moral judgment, particularly the ventromedial prefrontal cortex, show decreased activation when people are presented with genetic or environmental explanations for behavior. The anterior cingulate cortex, which processes moral conflict, becomes less engaged with external factors are emphasized. This suggests that external explanations literally reduce the brain's capacity for moral reasoning. But the most disturbing contemporary manifestation is how therapeutic and political discourse systemically undermines personal agency. Mental health approaches that focuses exclusively on brain chemistry or trauma history without addressing personal choice creates what Gurdjieff predicted: people who understand their conditioning but remain powerless to change it. Political movements that explain all problems through systemic oppression while denying individual agency create populations that feel victimized rather than empowered. This doesn't mean ignoring genetic influences or environmental factors. It means recognizing that understanding these influences can either increase or decrease moral agency depending on how they're framed. When external factors are presented as informative rather than deterministic, they can enhance rather than undermine personal responsibility. The 45th teaching, technology and the degradation of human vitality. Chapter 45 reveals Beelzebub's analysis of how humanity's mechanical relationship with electricity reflects and intensifies all their other psychological problems while directly contributing to the progressive shortening of the human lifespan. This chapter connects individual spiritual development with environmental responsibility in ways that anticipate current research on electromagnetic field effects. Beelzebub identifies electricity extraction and destruction as representing humanity's general tendency to exploit natural processes without understanding their deeper significance. The mechanical use of electricity without comprehending its cosmic function depletes certain cosmic substances that affect planetary environmental quality, making it increasingly difficult for humans to maintain the inner conditions necessary for normal lifespan. Contemporary research validates these concerns through studies of electromagnetic field exposure effects on human health. Low frequency and radio frequency electromagnetic fields have been shown to alter blood-brain barrier permeability, potentially leading to the accumulation of heavy metals in brain tissue. These changes may trigger neurological disorders, including autism spectrum conditions, which show increasing correlation with electromagnetic exposure. Studies reveal that electromagnetic field exposure creates oxidative stress in brain tissue by generating reactive oxygen species that damage cellular structures. The brain's high metabolic rate makes it particularly vulnerable to this oxidative damage, which can lead to neuronal death and dysfunction. Research shows significant loss of pyramidal cells in hippocampus regions of animals exposed to radiofrequency radiation at levels in telecommunications. But the implications extend well beyond direct biological effects. The psychological impact of constant electromagnetic stimulation may be contributing to the attention disorders, sleep disruption, and anxiety epidemics characterizing contemporary life. Studies showed that people exposed to electromagnetic fields report increased stress, headache, tiredness, decreased learning potential, and impaired cognitive function. The pattern Beelzebub identified, mechanical exploitation without understanding, now characterizes humanity's relationship with all technology. Social media platforms exploit psychological vulnerabilities without concern for mental health effects. Artificial intelligence systems optimized for engagement without considering cognitive development consequences. Digital devices provide constant stimulation without regard for attention span degradation or sleep cycle disruption. Research shows that excessive screen time literally rewires neural pathways, creating gray matter in regions responsible for executive function while strengthening addiction pathways associated with immediate gratification. The same mechanisms that make electromagnetic fields potentially harmful at cellular levels operate at psychological levels through digital technology addiction. The integration here, understanding our species crisis. These three chapters provide the complete framework for understanding humanity's current crisis as the culmination of interconnected psychological, philosophical, and technological patterns that prevent conscious development while accelerating unconscious destruction. Chapter 43 reveals that warfare emerges from the same psychological mechanisms that create political polarization, social media outrage, and interpersonal conflict. The neural pathways that make humans susceptible to extremist recruitment operate in ordinary social discourse, making conflict resolution impossible without addressing underlying neuroscience. Chapter 44 demonstrates that philosophical errors about moral responsibility systemically destroy human agency while creating the illusion of ethical behavior. Contemporary therapeutic and political discourse often reinforces these errors by emphasizing external factors without cultivating internal capacity for conscious choice. Chapter 45 shows that technological exploitation without understanding creates both environmental degradation and psychological dysfunction through the same mechanical consciousness that prevents spiritual development. The electromagnetic pollution affecting cellular health operates alongside digital pollution affecting attention and emotional regulation. For individuals navigating 2025, these insights provide crucial guidance for conscious development. Recognize that your capacity for conflict resolution depends on developing prefrontal cortex functions through practices that strengthen rational thinking under emotional pressure. Understand that authentic moral development requires taking complete responsibility for your psychological states, regardless of external factors that influence them. Most importantly, develop a conscious rather than mechanical relationship with technology. This means using digital devices in ways that support rather than undermine attention, using social media platforms that promote rather than prevent genuine dialogue, and creating electromagnetic environments that support rather than degrade biological functioning. The research validating Gurdjieff's observations suggests that individual conscious effort applied to these areas can produce extraordinary results because so few people are working against rather than with these destructive patterns. The same neuroplasticity that makes you vulnerable to technological manipulation makes rapid positive transformation possible when you apply sustained attention to practices that serve genuine rather than manufactured needs. But this also reveals why collective change seems impossible despite widespread recognition of problems. The psychological mechanisms that create warfare, moral abdication, and technological addiction operate below the level of ordinary awareness and resist change through the same patterns they create. Political solutions that don't address underlying neuroscience inevitably fail because they attempt to solve psychological problems through external arrangements. The question isn't whether you can avoid the technological and cultural forces that surround us. The question is whether you'll use understanding of these forces to develop conscious immunity to their harmful effects while contributing to whatever authentic cultural transformation might be possible. The neural pathways of destruction have been mapped. The philosophical errors have been identified. The technological dangers have been documented. The choice between conscious development and mechanical degradation is becoming clearer every day. Your individual decision affects not just your personal development, but the larger evolutionary process determining whether human consciousness leads to flourishing or collapse. I'm Mark Roach, wishing you all the best.